In the year 1206, across the immense plains of Mongolia, a man named Temujin would declare himself Genghis Khan, the sovereign of all, yet beneath the persona of the mighty conqueror who forged the largest continuous empire in history lay private secrets so sinister and unsettling that they remained concealed for centuries. Today, through records from medieval chroniclers and archaeological evidence, we expose controversial aspects regarding the intimate appetites of the great Khan and the customs that shaped his dominion. Genghis Khan was not merely a military invader. According to Persian and Chinese testimonies of that era, he employed intimate domination as a political instrument on a scale that surpasses modern comprehension. Scholars estimate he possessed more than 500 wives and concubines, but this figure signifies only the surface of his recorded indulgences. The first startling disclosure originates from the Persian historian Rashid al-Din, who chronicled how Genghis Khan perceived intimate humiliation not simply as personal subjugation, but as an intentional political tactic. During his campaigns, the mighty Khan allegedly institutionalized intimate practices as components of his psychological warfare. When his warriors seized a city, witnesses recount that the initial directive was not to seize gold or silver, but to establish absolute dominance over the households of the regional nobility. This practice, according to accounts of that period, was neither arbitrary nor chaotic. It was carefully systematized. Genghis Khan instituted a process whereby women deemed most attractive were separated and transferred to his personal harem, while others were allocated to his commanders as compensation. Sources assert that the great Khan reserved for himself a unique prerogative. He always retained the right to be the first to claim the wives and daughters of vanquished rulers. Arab writers of that age recount that Genghis Khan regarded the intimate degradation of his adversaries as the ultimate form of triumph. He often compelled husbands and fathers to observe while he imposed himself upon their wives and daughters. To the great Khan, breaking a man's spirit through the defilement of his kin was more gratifying than merely extinguishing his life. Yet the carnal cravings of Genghis Khan, according to 13th century Chinese accounts, extended beyond aggression toward adult women. Although we must weigh enemy narratives with care, multiple records suggest he harbored disturbing inclinations toward very young partners. The notion of age of consent did not exist within Mongol culture, and Genghis Khan exploited this absence to the extreme. His scouts were instructed to locate girls between 10 and 14 years old across conquered territories. The selection process for these victims was, by reports, a form of psychological torment. Young girls were torn from their families and transported to specialized camps where they were conditioned to serve the Khan. This operation encompassed not only intimate preparation, but also rituals of humiliation, crafted to utterly shatter their will and identity. One of the most distressing practices within Genghis Khan's harem, according to observers of that era, was what he termed knights of choice. On these occasions, the great Khan selected not one, but several women simultaneously to gratify his desires. Accounts allege these sessions could endure entire days, with Genghis Khan displaying almost preternatural carnal stamina that terrified his victims. What renders these reports even more appalling is that, according to chroniclers, Genghis Khan was not content with mere passive submission. He is said to have developed a grotesque fascination with inflicting physical suffering during intimate acts. Burns, scars, and cuts were discovered on the bodies of women who emerged from his chambers, evidence of twisted rituals of pain and pleasure that far surpassed what was considered typical even by the savage norms of that epoch. Marco Polo, who traversed Mongol lands decades following the Great Khan's demise, collected second-hand accounts of practices within the empire. According to his notes, Genghis Khan had devised a system whereby provincial officials were compelled to deliver an annual levy of young women. Those who failed to meet the quota faced consequences, while the most appealing were dispatched to Karakorum, the imperial capital. Perhaps the darkest dimension of Genghis Khan's sexuality was his utilization of forced marriages as a mechanism of political control. When he subdued a region, he frequently mandated unions between members of his own kin and the local aristocracy. These marriages functioned not only to consolidate authority, but also to fulfill his fantasies of complete domination over conquered noble bloodlines. The Great Khan also possessed, according to chroniclers, the grim custom of collecting the widows of kings and nobles slain in combat. These women were coerced into participating in ceremonies wherein they were symbolically wed to Genghis Khan before the sepulchres of their deceased husbands, a form of posthumous degradation that signified his absolute command over life and death. The influence of Genghis Khan's carnal compulsions permeated his dominion through the institution of what sources identify as the right of the first night. All Mongol lords were entitled to deflower any newlywed woman within their territories prior to her consummating the marriage with her spouse. This practice was perceived not as violation, but as a privilege of conquest. Genghis Khan's harem in Karakorum was portrayed by Arab travelers as a veritable palace of horrors. Hundreds of women of all ages dwelled in conditions that blended superficial opulence with perpetual dread. They were divided into distinct ranks: the favorites, who enjoyed limited privileges, the initiates, who endured a phase of training, and the discarded, who were often executed to prevent exposure of the Khan's intimate secrets. Because contraceptive methods of that era were primitive, many of these women became pregnant repeatedly. Genghis Khan regarded these offspring as extensions of his dominance, though only males were formally acknowledged. Girls were frequently abandoned or bestowed as gifts to allies. It is approximated that the Great Khan fathered more than 1,000 children, producing a lineage that proliferated across Asia. One of the most harrowing practices, according to biased reports, was the so-called virginity ritual. Genghis Khan required all virgin women in his harem to undergo a public rite wherein their chastity was examined before an audience of senior officers. Those who failed were immediately executed, while those who succeeded were branded with permanent insignia denoting their new station. The Great Khan also cultivated an obsession with women of diverse ethnicities, perceiving racial variety as a form of trophy. His harem included Chinese, Persian, Arab, Russian women, and dozens of other peoples. He believed that possessing women from all subjugated realms symbolized his supremacy over all known humanity. Yet perhaps the most unsettling legacy of Genghis Khan's carnal excesses is genetic. Modern DNA analysis indicates that approximately 16% of men across a vast swath of Asia bear a Y chromosome traceable to the Great Khan. This demonstrates that his insatiable urges quite literally shaped the genetic makeup of an entire continent. The system founded by Genghis Khan did not perish with him. His successors preserved and even amplified many of these practices. The Mongol Empire became synonymous not only with military expansion, but with systematic intimate domination, whereby populations were redistributed throughout the empire as personal chattel of the conquerors. The death of Genghis Khan in 1227 brought no relief to his victims. In accordance with Mongol tradition, many of his wives and concubines were interred alive with him to serve in the afterlife. The precise location of his burial site remains a mystery, perhaps intentionally obscured to safeguard the dark truths entombed with him. We must evaluate the most extreme accounts concerning Genghis Khan with prudence, as many originated from chronicles of subjugated peoples eager to vilify the Mongol sovereign. The Persian writer Juvaini, for example, recounted how women from conquered cities were compelled to partake in contests where they were forced to gratify multiple Mongol soldiers, with the defeated subjected to public execution. Although tangible corroboration is lacking, these ghastly competitions were allegedly staged as amusement for the troops. Some narratives suggest Genghis Khan instituted a system of intimate loans among his generals, wherein women of the royal harem were temporarily assigned to commanders distinguished in battle, on the condition that they recount their experiences in detail upon return. This institutionalized voyeurism enabled the great Khan to maintain unchallenged dominance over intimacy across his dominion. One of the most disputed elements, according to period sources, was the solstice ceremony. Genghis Khan believed his virility was directly linked to the vigor of his empire, and conducted rituals wherein dozens of pregnant women were paraded before him. Those who delivered sons during the rite were rewarded, while those who bore daughters endured severe punishment. Chroniclers claim the great Khan maintained meticulous logs of his intimate activities, delegating scribes to record them. These records were not merely for private gratification, but functioned as instruments of political coercion. Information concerning the carnal tendencies of local nobles and their households was likely gathered and wielded to secure loyalty through disgrace.